Welcome, everyone, to another custom-tailored deep dive. We are thrilled to have you with us today.
Yeah, thanks for joining us.
And our mission for this deep dive is to explore a truly fascinating psychological archetype. It's the constitutional type known as Phosphorus.
Which is such an interesting concept.
It really is. Now, this profile is drawn from homeopathic literature, which might sound like an unexpected place to find psychological analysis.
So it is an unusual source for modern psychology, definitely. But to give you some context, the homeopathic tradition operates on this idea that physical ailments and deeply ingrained personality traits are inextricably linked.
Right, they call these constitutional type.
Exactly. It's a holistic framework that builds these incredibly rich, complex psychological profiles. And the Phosphorus type is arguably the most compelling archetype in the entire study.
Because the profile introduces Phosphorus as the ultimate nice personality.
Oh, yeah.
This is the radiant, loving, deeply spiritual, and incredibly warm person everyone is immediately drawn to.
The one everyone wishes they were, really.
Right. But reading through the research, there is a massive catch to all that light and warmth.
A huge catch. The catch is that all of this incredible radiant empathy stems from a complete and utter lack of personal boundaries.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Because that is such a wild concept.
It's intense.
We're going to look at the light and the dark sides of this highly impressionable, sometimes maddeningly irresponsible personality type.
And why it matters.
Exactly.
Yeah.
By the end of this, understanding the Phosphorus archetype might completely reframe how you view the highly empathetic, sensitive people in your own life.
So to really grasp the mechanics of the Phosphorus type, we have to start with their core essence.
Which is defined as a total lack of an ego identity.
Yes. For the vast majority of people, growing up involves developing an ego. It acts as a necessary filter.
Like a psychological boundary.
Right, a boundary that separates me from the rest of the world.
Wait, but how can an adult actually function with zero ego boundary? Wouldn't they just be totally paralyzed by the constant influx of the world around them?
You would think so. But instead of being paralyzed, they remain somewhat like an infant in how they experience reality.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, they haven't developed that rigid, protective wall. They're completely merged with their surroundings. The profile uses the analogy of a sponge.
A sponge.
Yeah, they soak up all the impressions, the subtle vibes, and the raw emotions of whatever environment they walk into, entirely bypassing their own intellect.
So if a Phosphorus person sits next to someone who happens to be quietly terrified, the Phosphorus person suddenly becomes terrified without any logical reason.
They just absorb it.
Through a kind of psychic osmosis.
Precisely. And this extreme openness applies to everything they encounter.
Right.
A beautiful piece of music or a vibrant sunset will send them into a level of transcendent rapture that more guarded people simply cannot access.
But by that same token,
walking through a bleak, negative environment or a hostile room will cause them acute, almost unbearable physical distress. They are fully exposed to the elements of human emotion.
how does someone like that even experience a sense of self?
There is a brilliant quote from the Romantic poet John Keats that captures this perfectly. Keats described the poetic character in a way that is identical to the Phosphorus experience.
What do you say?
He wrote that the poet has no self. He said he is continually in for and filling some other body.
Wow.
Keats actually confessed that when he was in a room full of people, the identity of everyone in the room began to press upon him until his own sense of self was completely annihilated.
That sounds both beautiful and terrifying.
Very much so.
To make this a bit more grounded, the research brings up a fantastic pop culture example. The character of Maria from The Sound of Music, played by Julie Andrews.
A perfect example. She is presented as the ultimate Phosphorus.
Think about Maria's trajectory in that story. She has this endearing, luminous, childlike quality.
But she is also completely infuriating to the rigid nuns at the abbey.
Because of her flightiness.
Exactly. And her complete inability to take adult conventions seriously. Modesty, propriety, strict schedules. She simply doesn't compute them.
But it is that exact innocence, her completely unconditional, unfiltered love, that manages to melt the heart of the deeply rigid Captain Von Trapp.
Right.
No one else in his life could reach him, but her absolute lack of boundaries just completely disarms his defenses.
The flip side to that innocence, however, is extreme gullibility.
Oh, sure.
Because they lack a strong internal filter to critically evaluate incoming information, they have a very hard time assessing risks, realistically.
They believe everything.
Yes, they are incredibly vulnerable to scaremongering and struggle to differentiate fiction from reality.
I found the historical example of this fascinating. During Orson Welles' infamous War of the Worlds radio broadcast in the 1930s.
The fictional drama claiming Martians were invading New Jersey?
Yes. The people fleeing to the hills in absolute genuine panic were classic Phosphorus types. For them, the internal feeling of terror completely overrode any objective reasoning that it might just be a radio play.
Because in their mind, if the emotion is real, the threat is real.
Wow.
The internal feeling is the only truth that matters in that moment.
Which leads to some situations that are objectively hilarious from the outside.
Oh, absolutely.
There's an anecdote in the profile about a Phosphorus woman on a beach holiday with her middle-aged husband. She spots him paying what she perceives to be far too much attention to a young girl in a swimsuit.
Given her highly imaginative, dramatic nature, she immediately bypasses logic.
Jumps to incredibly vivid conclusions. Her friend even suggests she might be misinterpreting the situation, but the Phosphorus woman is already miles down the road.
She gets entirely worked up.
Mentally writing the script for this huge dramatic confrontation where the scorned wife unleashes her fury on the heartless husband. She's experiencing a potent mixture of dread, excitement, and enthusiasm for the impending drama. But then the bubble pops. It turns out the pretty girl in the swimsuit was actually the daughter of the couple sitting nearby. Her husband was just staring adoringly at his own middle-aged wife.
The psychological projection there is incredible. The analysis notes she was outwardly relieved, of course, but internally, she was actually a little disappointed.
Disappointed.
Yeah, she had built up this thrilling emotional narrative, and suddenly the stage was empty.
If their imagination is that vivid and they get so easily swept away by these internal dramas, how on earth do they handle the boring day-to-day responsibilities of adult life? Paying bills, keeping schedules, going to work?
The short answer is they don't handle it well.
Not at all.
They fundamentally hate what we might call the grammar of life. The voluntary boundaries of self-discipline, the tedious details of contracts, the repayment of debts. They find all of it to be an absolute strain and incredibly boring.
They are the type of person who will impulsively buy a Ferrari or empty their savings account to fund a passing enthusiasm without a single thought about the long-term consequences.
They just operate on the assumption that others will inevitably bail them out when the bill comes due.
And the crazy thing is, people usually do.
What's fascinating here is the specific defense mechanism they use to ensure people keep bailing them out.
Right.
When they are finally cornered in a difficult practical situation, they deploy emotional dramatism. It is referred to as gilding the lily.
Gilding the lily.
Yeah, they will crank up the emotional volume, garnish their genuine distress with a heavy dose of play acting, and completely distract you from the hard facts of their irresponsibility.
They play the victim so effectively, relying on those wide, innocent eyes, that they attract instant sympathy. They practically get away with murder.
There is a remarkably funny story that perfectly illustrates why we forgive them.
Oh, the unpaid debt story.
Yes, a professional loaned a considerable sum of money to a Phosphorus friend who needed it for a serious crisis. The friend promised to repay it speedily.
And needless to say, she vanished.
Vanished. Years go by, the lender completely gives up hope. Then, completely out of the blue, they run into each other on the street.
The lender puts on a serious face, preparing to finally confront this unpaid debt.
It is the ultimate test of the Phosphorus defense mechanism.
The friend doesn't even flinch. She immediately says that she had been aware all this time that she owed the money.
Right, and she had just been waiting for the lender to ask for it.
And then she would treat her to dinner to celebrate. She just flashed this sheepish, utterly innocent smile.
And the lender was so completely disarmed by the sheer absurd audacity of the lie that her anger just vanished on the spot.
It's a literal flight from the present. When reality gets unpleasant, the Phosphorus individual simply slips out the door.
They might escape physically, or they might escape mentally into substances, fantasy films, or novels.
They required a constant stream of excitement to avoid mundane difficulties, which makes them highly prone to gambling addictions.
The horses, the roulette wheel.
Anything that offers a spark.
For the female Phosphorus in particular, it often manifests as adopting the damsel in distress persona.
She presents herself as so innocent and helpless against the harsh world that she's constantly waiting for a knight in shining armor to rescue her from her own financial or practical messes.
Though once the knight does arrive, he eventually realizes the sheer scale of the chaos he just signed up for.
They are constantly chasing the spark because that is their fundamental nature. Which brings us to the actual physical element of phosphorus, which literally translates to bearer of light.
The chemical metaphor here is so fitting. Pure phosphorus metal is so highly reactive and unstable that it bursts into flames the second it is exposed to the air.
The phosphorus personality operates the exact same way. They burn incredibly bright and they burn up quickly. They possess this electric, irresistible radiance.
To help visualize this, we can look at some of the celebrity counterparts that embody this sunny temperament and sheer joy.
People like Julia Roberts, Gina Davis, Martin Short, and Nat King Cole.
These are individuals who light up a screen or a stage.
The profile argues that no other constitutional type can compete with a happy phosphorus. They naturally access a kind of pure, joyful ecstasy that mystics will meditate for decades trying to achieve.
But again, we have to look at the structural integrity of that light. Because they don't have a strong internal anchor, that bright light essentially reflects whatever happens to be standing in front of it.
Which creates a deeply chameleon-like identity.
Exactly. Because they lack a rigid sense of self, they borrow the attitudes, beliefs, and morals of the people around them.
So if they have no internal anchor, who are they really? Are they just mirroring whoever they are dating or hanging out with?
In many ways, yes. They are not inherently rebellious. If a phosphorus child grows up with parents who are highly moralistic, the child will adopt that strict moral code.
Okay, but what if their parents are, say, career criminals?
The child will somehow find a way to condone the lifestyle and genuinely believe it is justified. They fill their internal void with whatever organization, religion, or charismatic person they happen to admire at the time.
And when those borrowed beliefs inevitably clash with their impulsive desires, how do they resolve that cognitive dissonance?
They utilize a fascinating mental gymnastics routine called woolly thinking.
Woolly thinking. I love that.
There is a brilliant literary example of this from Peter Carey's novel Oscar and Lucinda.
Oh, yes?
The character of Oscar Hopkins is raised by an incredibly severe, puritanical father. Oscar internalizes all of this severity. He even denies himself the basic pleasure of tasting a Christmas pudding because he views the indulgence as a grave sin.
He eventually goes to Oxford to study divinity and become a priest.
But then Oscar discovers the thrill of horse racing and gambling.
Now, gambling is fundamentally aggressively opposed to his strict religious upbringing.
Exactly. But rather than face that glaring contradiction, Oscar deploys classic phosphorus woolly thinking. He genuinely convinces himself that God guided him to the racetrack.
To show him how he might earn a living while studying for the priesthood.
He doesn't believe he is gambling for the adrenaline rush. He believes he has been divinely chosen to win this money for a higher, sacred purpose.
It is the ultimate rationalization. And this scattered, disjointed way of processing information permeates their everyday life, too.
Because their mind is open to so many simultaneous influences, they become easily muddled. The mental blind spots can be staggering.
There's a specific anecdote detailing a phosphorus person who is so completely overloaded by the sensory input of her own kitchen that she put her clothes into the dishwasher.
And the dirty dishes into the washing machine.
And only realized the massive error when she finally sat down and started crying from the overwhelm.
I imagine this woolly thinking also makes them prone to some pretty wild assumptions about the world.
Absolutely. A key feature of their cognitive style is making sweeping generalizations.
Instead of analyzing information logically or looking for patterns over time, they just fit the entire world to their immediate localized emotional narrative.
The example provided is someone meeting exactly one Russian person, having a pleasant 5-minute chat, and immediately concluding, oh, they're lovely people. I met one once and he had such a nice smile.
They extrapolate a single fleeting emotional experience to an entire global population.
Which is fascinating when you apply that to modern society. Think about how vulnerable a boundaryless, highly emotional thinker is to modern echo chambers or algorithm-driven media.
If they don't dare to analyze the data, they just flit like a butterfly from one passing emotional resonance to another, fully adopting whatever reality feels best in the moment.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. Because they are so relentlessly open to the world, that ecstatic, joyous nature is incredibly fragile. They exist right on the tipping point of emotion.
Their profound joy can flip into absolute paralyzing terror in a matter of seconds.
This is the shadow side of being a sponge.
You can't selectively absorb only the good vibes.
The degree to which they are fearful depends entirely on the sensory data of their environment. If they are bombarded by too many impressions at once, it triggers sheer panic.
The scenario painted in the research is a phosphorus child at a busy birthday party. At first, they're having the time of their life.
They are highly stimulated, interacting with everyone, totally intoxicated with the excitement, the sugar, and the noise.
But then the environment shifts. A clown is brought into the room to entertain the kids.
For a typical child with healthy ego boundaries, the clown is maybe mildly amusing or perhaps a tiny bit unsettling.
But for the already overloaded phosphorus child, the sudden appearance of this bizarre, painted figure completely shatters their ability to cope.
It is simply too much data. The child collapses in a panic, crying hysterically for their mother, completely unable to digest the new situation. They just short-circuit.
And as adults, they exhibit the exact same short-circuiting behavior, particularly regarding their own physical health. They are intensely prone to hypochondria.
A simple bout of indigestion isn't just a stomach ache for a phosphorus adult. Their unrestrained imagination immediately bypasses logic
And convinces them that it is a definitive sign of stomach cancer or some impending catastrophic disease. They magnify tiny somatic sensations into absolute tragedies.
This raises an important question. How does a human being who is so vulnerable, with no psychological boundaries and a wildly catastrophizing imagination, actually survive the everyday terrors of the world?
The answer is magical thinking.
Magical thinking.
Yes. Because they are so intensely open to the perceived violence and chaos of the world, they use charms, rituals, and amulets to artificially ward off dangers.
If we elevate this concept, magical thinking is actually an evolutionary psychological defense mechanism.
It is a way for the human brain to regain a sense of control in an environment that feels entirely uncontrollable.
They will perform intricate mental rituals to protect themselves or rely heavily on physical objects.
They might collect lucky shells from a specific beach or carry around a locket of hair from an old lover, firmly believing these physical items project a force field that can protect them from harm.
Despite carrying around all this underlying fear, the profile makes sure to emphasize that their adventurous spirit and their pure joie de vivre usually win out in the end.
And a lot of this raw emotional energy translates into an incredible capacity for the arts.
Phosphorus individuals are frequently gifted artistically, but what is telling is the type of art they gravitate toward.
Their artistic output perfectly reflects the lightness and buoyancy of their own spirit.
They are far more likely to prefer delicate watercolors over heavy, brooding, realistic oils.
In music, they gravitate toward romantic ballads or lively, energetic jazz.
While they might be deeply moved by heavy, complex pieces like a Wagner opera or a Beethoven symphony, those heavy works tend to make them far too morose.
They actively avoid anything that weighs down their spirit, preferring brilliant, lighter works like Mozart.
That internal lightness is also frequently reflected in their physical appearance, according to the homeopathic descriptions of the constitutional types.
The physical description is incredibly specific.
The typical phosphorus person is described as striking, usually tall, very slim, and lithe.
They are highly flexible, sometimes even double-jointed, with limbs that tend to be long and graceful.
They carry themselves like dancers. They typically have fine hair, a wide mouth that reflects their open, communicative nature.
And very large, attractive, highly expressive eyes.
It is a physicality that perfectly mirrors their psychological transparency. They are structurally built to express emotion and to connect effortlessly with others.
So what does this all mean?
Why does diving into this specific, esoteric archetype matter to you today? I think understanding the phosphorus type is a masterclass in understanding the extreme end of the empathy spectrum.
It helps you recognize the people in your life who might seem intentionally flighty, wildly dramatic, or frustratingly irresponsible, and realize they aren't operating out of malice or selfishness.
They were simply navigating the world without the emotional armor that the rest of us put on every single morning.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we live in a modern society that constantly demands we build strong personal brands, erect rigid boundaries, and protect our own interests at all costs.
The phosphorus type stands in complete, radical opposition to that modern survival strategy.
They remind us of the incredible transcendent beauty of remaining completely open to the universe.
But at the same time, they serve as a cautionary tale, showing us the severe danger, the gullibility, and the exhausting toll of living without a protective shell.
It really is the ultimate double-edged sword.
Which leaves us with a final, provocative thought to chew on after you finish listening today.
What's that?
If achieving a state of total, blissful connection with the world around you requires completely dissolving your own protective boundaries, at what point does extreme empathy stop being a beautiful gift and start becoming the ultimate loss of your own self?
That is definitely something to think about the next time you find yourself soaking up the emotions of a crowded room.
We want to thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the luminous, chaotic world of Phosphorus. Stay curious. Keep looking beyond the surface and keep seeking out those hidden nuggets of knowledge. We'll see you next time.